Character and setting. Introduction. Amanda Reynolds had always been a beacon of ambition on Manhattan's Upper East Side, a self-made marketing executive whose warmth and wit made her the heart of every event she attended. Born and raised in Chicago, Amanda moved to New York with dreams taller than the skyscrapers. She crafted her life with intention, a thriving career, a stylish penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, and a circle of accomplished friends. Married for 10 years to Jack Reynolds, a senior project manager at a global tech firm, Amanda enjoyed the outward perfection of their partnership. Jack was charming, dependable, and deeply admired by peers. Together, they were seen as a modern American success story, a power couple who regularly appeared in charity galas, networking nights, and the city's coveted social scene. Photos of their smiling faces graced social media. Their anniversary trips to Napa Valley and Bermuda became the envy of Amanda's colleagues, and their holiday parties had become the stuff of legend among their acquaintances. Yet beneath this carefully managed veneer, Amanda's world was rooted in routine. Mornings began with New York Times, crosswords, and coffee shared over city views, followed by busy days packed with client meetings, brainstorming sessions, and strategic planning. Evenings, though, belonged to their sanctuary, a sprawling, tastefully decorated home where art and books lined every surface, and laughter echoed across dinner tables filled with friends. Amanda's identity was inseparable from both her devotion to her husband and the career she'd built. A delicate balance she protected fiercely. The couple's social calendar was packed, their professional ambitions tightly interwoven. For Amanda, New York was not just a city, but a stage. Every interaction mattered. Every impression lasted. She prided herself on reading rooms, on knowing when to charm and when to listen. But as autumn settled over the city, a subtle current of unease began to swirl beneath the glossy surface of Amanda's life. Unspoken questions lingered in the air, missed messages, and stolen glances that Amanda, ever perceptive, could not ignore. The very city that once promised infinite possibility now seemed to cast long shadows, and the fortress of security Amanda had mastered began to tremble at its foundation. The moment of truth unfolds. The revelation came not as a sudden shock, but as an ominous crescendo built over weeks of subtle changes. Amanda first noticed Jack growing distant, a slight hesitation in his kisses, conversations that drifted off mid-sentence, and late nights excused away by vague work emergencies. While she rationalized the oddities at first, her intuition, once her greatest tool in business, began to gnaw at her in private moments. It was a drizzly Thursday evening in November when the truth began to surface. Jack's phone buzzed incessantly during dinner, lighting up the marble countertop with messages he glanced at, but never opened in front of Amanda. After he left for a confidential conference call, Amanda's unease grew into restless curiosity. She wasn't the snooping type, but that night, as rain battered the city skyline beyond their windows, something pushed her to look closer. The device was unguarded, a small window unlocked, a rare lapse for Jack. One message caught her eye, a string of texts from Kelly Monroe, Jack's direct superior at work, someone Amanda had met only a handful of times at corporate gatherings. The conversation started innocuously, but soon turned unmistakably intimate. There were inside jokes only lovers could share, and late-night rendezvous, planned in codes that didn't try hard enough to hide the truth. Amanda's hands trembled as she scrolled further, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't just the betrayal of physical intimacy. but the tone of emotional complicity. Secrets kept, a world sustained outside the boundaries of their marriage. She felt suspended in an instant outside time, the world narrowing to the silent, sick glow of the screen, and the sense of her own home becoming unfamiliar. Despite the agony of that moment, Amanda's mind raced ahead. Memories of every odd look at office parties, Kelly's too eager laughter at Jack's jokes, the carefully steered conversations, all the little moments she'd ignored, tumbled into place with startling clarity. The story behind her marriage unraveled thread by thread before her eyes, revealing wounds she hadn't dared imagine. The hours that followed were a haze of disbelief and quiet heartbreak. Amanda sat alone in their living room, city lights flickering silently beyond the glass, trying to make sense of what she'd uncovered. She considered confrontation, rage, and tears. But as the night deepened, something profound began to settle within her. The first ember of resolve. In those long, sleepless hours, Amanda understood that everything had changed. Not just her marriage, but her place within the life she had so carefully built. Suffering in the first great fall, Amanda sat motionless for hours after that dreadful night, the city's distant hum barely masking the relentless storm inside her. The ambient twinkle of Manhattan's skyline, once a symbol of her ambition and arrival, now seemed cold and indifferent. There in her living room, memories assaulted her. Shared glances over candlelit dinners, whispered promises on lazy Sunday mornings, laughter echoing off marble countertops. Each recollection twisted into a sharp reminder of what she believed to be true, and an agonizing knowledge that much of it was a lie. She wept silently at first, tears slipping down her cheeks as she tried to catalog how she'd gotten to this point. Amanda was not a woman easily unraveled. She was known for her poise, her unshakable calm in a crisis, her ability to diffuse heated meetings and turn chaos into opportunity. Yet now, as dawn crept pale and uncertain through the tall windows, Amanda knew she was utterly adrift, with no script to follow, no plan to save herself from heartbreak. For days, she functioned on a kind of autopilot, mechanically moving from task to task. She went to work because she had to. She answered calls, attended boardroom meetings, reviewed campaigns. Her outward appearance, immaculate hair, tasteful navy dress, a smile that never quite reached her eyes, fooled nearly everyone. Amanda kept up the performance, even as her mind replayed Jack's betrayal in increasingly vivid detail. She would find herself on the subway after a long workday, gripping the metal pole so hard her knuckles whitened, tears threatening to spill in public. The sense of humiliation stung the most. Not only had her partner lied to her, he had done so with a woman who moved in the very same social and professional circles Amanda had worked years to enter. At home, the isolation was far worse. The penthouse, so full of life during parties, so warm when friends and family gathered, was now unbearably silent. Even Rue, their old golden retriever, seemed to sense her despair, resting his head on her lap, but unable to offer more than quiet companionship. She would sit on the balcony at night, cold wind ruffling her hair, looking down at the city she had once conquered. The obsidian grid of New York's avenues, the distant wail of sirens, it all seemed to underscore her loneliness, turning familiar comfort into a kind of exile. Amanda's pain was amorphous, shifting from raw heartbreak to icy anger, then dissolving into numbness. She tried at first to rationalize what had happened. Maybe Jack's affair was a symptom of stress, of the distance that sometimes crept into their marriage when his work hours grew long and their conversations too brief. Maybe it was Kelly's power, her status, the thrill of something dangerous. But ultimately, Amanda realized these were excuses, bandages on a much deeper wound. A wound that had to do with her own faith in people, her commitment, her relentless optimism. The trauma, she recognized, went beyond the betrayal itself. It was the shattering of the identity she'd spent a lifetime creating. Sleep eluded Amanda for weeks. She lay awake in the half-light, replaying confrontations she'd never had, composing emails she'd never sent. She considered revenge, sometimes in elaborate cinematic detail, and then recoiled, exhausted by her own bitterness. Other times, she fantasized about leaving the city entirely, buying a ticket to somewhere with ocean air and no history, starting over as a new woman. But for every fantasy, a deeper fear crept in. Who was she if she wasn't Jack's partner, the woman with the perfect life? Would her friends and colleagues judge her? Would she be forever marked as the woman whose husband had chosen someone else? Still, Amanda tried to reach for small anchors. She met with her closest friends for brunches at her favorite Upper East Side cafes, sometimes opening up, other times pretending nothing was wrong. She went running in Central Park at dawn, letting the strain in her muscles drive out for a brief time, the ache in her chest. She filled notebooks with thoughts and plans,
That's a breakthrough.
rereading old letters Jack had written her when they first fell in love, searching for signs she'd missed. She called her younger brother in Chicago, who listened quietly and told her simply, "You'll get through this. You're Amanda. You don't let anything break you." But there were moments, too, when the grief overwhelmed her. One Sunday afternoon, Amanda found herself at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, wandering rooms filled with impossibly old, impossibly beautiful things. A marble statue shattered in ancient times. A tapestry painstakingly mended by hands centuries ago. She stood in front of a painting she'd come to love, struck by the notion that even things irreparably damaged could still belong in the world, could still move others, could still possess meaning and grace. That realization, gentle as a late autumn breeze, stayed with her as she returned to her empty home. Amanda began to allow herself to mourn, not just for the marriage that had been lost, but for the vision of her future she'd cherished for so long. She grieved for lost trust, for the laughter that would never quite ring true again, for the family she and Jack would never become. But she also grieved for the cost of perfection, the endless days spent proving herself, the sacrifices she'd made for an image now shown to be so fragile. What Amanda didn't know, not yet, was that pain, this deep, aching sorrow, would also reshape her. Each sleepless night, each tearful conversation with a trusted friend, carved out space inside her for something new. Resilience, yes, but also clarity and an emerging resolve she had not anticipated. She realized that survival wasn't about pretending the wound didn't exist or striking back in anger. It had instead to do with facing the truth squarely, allowing it to hurt, and then deciding what came next. By late December, as icy winds howled down Fifth Avenue and the city prepared for another new year, Amanda found her energy subtly changing. She stopped blaming herself, stopped searching for flaws that might have pushed Jack away. She remembered all the battles she had already fought, moving to New York alone after college, landing her first big client, fending off a dozen small defeats no one else had ever witnessed. She took pride, quietly, in the knowledge that even as her world crumbled, she had endured. One night, sitting on that windswept balcony high above the city, Amanda finally allowed herself to dream of a different future. Not the one she'd mapped out so carefully with Jack, but one that was hers alone. A future built not on the approval of others or the illusion of a perfect life, but on her own strength and authenticity. She didn't know yet what form it would take or how she would get there. But for the first time in weeks, Amanda felt a flicker of hope, a sense that this great fall, this crushing heartbreak, might also be the beginning of something new. The plan of feigned forgiveness. Amanda sat in the pre-dawn gloom, watching the pale light creep over the city skyline. Her coffee, untouched and cold. The storm of grief had not yet fully passed, but something in her had shifted. She realized she stood at a crossroads. She could allow herself to be swept away by humiliation and rage, or she could choose a new path, one that was hers to define. Amanda's mind, always so sharp in business, turned over the possibilities, weighing pride against strategy, pain against opportunity. She knew herself well enough to understand that confrontation, no matter how cathartic, would not restore what she had lost. There would be no dramatic end to this chapter, no shouting match in the apartment, no public scene. Instead, Amanda would make her pain her weapon. She would become, at least on the surface, the perfect wife, the gracious, forgiving partner that everyone admired. She would use everyone's expectations as camouflage. Amanda began with Jack. The day after her discovery, she suggested dinner at one of their favorite restaurants, a familiar place in Soho, where the lighting was soft and the noise level safely blurred secrets. She dressed in a way that signaled normalcy, elegant but restrained, her smile as composed as ever. Jack, sensing her calm, was visibly relieved. Over plates of pan-seared salmon and glasses of crisp Sauvignon Blanc, Amanda brought up the issue. Her words were gentle, laden with disappointment rather than accusation. "Jack, I know something's happened. I'm hurt, but I'm not here to judge you tonight. What I want to understand is the man sitting in front of me, and whether we have a future to fight for." For a moment, Jack looked as if he might break down. The stress of his duplicity weighed on him, but Amanda's approach disarmed any defensive impulse. He explained, haltingly, about the pressures at work, the loneliness he sometimes felt, how things with Kelly just happened. With each word, he seemed more vulnerable and less the villain she had painted in the long nights alone. Amanda nodded sympathetically, never letting on how much rage simmered underneath her careful mask. She told him, quietly but firmly, that trust would have to be rebuilt. She offered forgiveness, or an imitation of it, on the condition that they work to repair their marriage, go to counseling, show a united front at work and in public. Jack, desperate to hold on to the life they had built together, agreed wholeheartedly. Here, Amanda knew, was the first step, turning suspicion and chaos into control. But Amanda's vision reached beyond her marriage. She understood, perhaps for the first time, how precarious her position was in New York's social and corporate circles. She'd observed over years how easily people who fell from grace, especially women, were cast aside. The city revered resilience, but it didn't pity weakness. If she wanted to survive, to rise, Amanda could not afford the role of broken-hearted wife. She had to become someone even more formidable. So Amanda resumed her place on the social scene. She accepted every invitation that landed in her inbox: gallery openings, charity balls, corporate mixers. Her designer dresses, impeccable hair, and dazzling conversation made her impossible to ignore. She learned how to laugh at jokes she'd heard 1,000 times, to steer conversations away from her personal life, and to draw praise for her loyalty and grace in the face of family challenges. hints she let slip without ever naming Jack's betrayal. To the outside world, Amanda became aspirational, a woman who could face adversity and remain unbowed. At company functions, Amanda played the role of supportive spouse impeccably. She congratulated Jack publicly on his work achievements, never letting the strain show. With Kelly, she was flawless, gracious, subtly warm, never accusatory. She even invited Kelly to group lunches and events, presenting herself as magnanimous and open-hearted. It was an exquisitely orchestrated charade, one that won her admiration and whispers of praise from colleagues and board members alike. Amanda's poise only made Jack and Kelly lower their guard. Privately, Amanda began to build her network. She cultivated relationships with other executive spouses, befriended HR directors, and casually gleaned information from assistants and interns. She took note of every whispered rumor, every inconsistency in company stories. Every time Kelly's name popped up in office gossip, Amanda patiently assembled a dossier, not out of vindictiveness, but out of necessity. She understood that the only way to tip the scales in her favor was to know which threads would unravel the carefully constructed power Jack and Kelly held at the firm. The hardest moments came at home, when the apartment was quiet and Amanda could no longer hide behind her performances. There were nights when the ache would resurface, unexpected and sharp as a knife. She managed these moments with ritual, taking Rue, the loyal golden retriever, for long walks through Central Park, calling her brother in Chicago for grounding conversation, journaling her thoughts with brutal honesty. These private acts became Amanda's foundation, a space to process her grief in safety so she could carry the mask in public. What surprised Amanda most was how authentic her resilience began to feel, even as she played a part. The more she embraced the role of the forgiving wife, the more empowered she felt by her ability to control the narrative. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't have to mean forgetting or accepting. Sometimes, forgiveness was a strategy, a way to hold power while others expected weakness. As winter deepened, Amanda sensed the tide turning. Jack became more dependable, eager to please, and less careful around her. Kelly, smug in Amanda's apparent goodwill, relaxed her guard in social settings. No one suspected that Amanda was watching, documenting, learning. She was not plotting revenge for its own sake. Rather, she was building a new reality, one where she dictated the terms, where her future would not be determined by betrayal or pity, but by her own design. Amanda's plan was subtle, but relentless. She would wait until every piece was in place, the right contacts, the irrefutable facts, the trust of those in power. When the time came, her actions would seem as natural and inevitable as the turning of the seasons. What Jack and Kelly would never see coming was that Amanda's forgiveness was not a surrender. It was the first move in a far more complicated game, one she intended to win, joining the upper echelons and acting in silence. After Amanda committed to her plan of feigned forgiveness, her life's tempo took on a new orchestration, one where every gesture, every word, was chosen for its subtle impact rather than mere habit. The pain of betrayal had not left her. It lived inside, a cold ember at her core. Yet in its place was now a sense of purpose she had never imagined. Amanda was going to master her circumstances, not just survive them. She began with the most public canvas available, New York's glittering social scene. The invitations rolling in, from museum galas to charity auctions and rooftop soirees, were no longer background noise. They became strategic appointments. Amanda attended everything, dressed in outfits that whispered understated power and refinement. Her shoes always clicked confidently on marble floors. Her laughter soft but memorable. Her observations sharp and always kind. At these events, Amanda worked rooms with the skill of a diplomat. She mingled with the city's elite, venture capitalists, politicians, celebrated artists, and the old money matrons whose approval mattered far more than it seemed. Amanda never discussed her personal tribulations. She instead asked thoughtful questions, remembered birthdays, and gently brokered connections between people who would owe her favors later. While most guests saw these gatherings as rituals of affluence, Amanda saw battlefields of influence and opportunity. She learned quickly who quietly pulled the levers at Jack's company. Board members with domineering spouses, rising stars eager to please, and wizened HR directors who knew everyone's secrets. She volunteered for charity committees, chaired by the CEO's wife, brainstorming with a subtle brilliance that left people feeling inspired in her presence. In every interaction, Amanda's old self-doubt wrestled with her growing confidence. There were nights she'd return home exhausted, peeling off her designer dress and wonder if she was fooling anyone at all, or even herself. But each successful conversation, each invitation for coffee or discreet lunch added another brick to her foundation. Meanwhile, Amanda turned silent observer inside the company's social circles. At events with Jack and Kelly, she transformed into the model of poise and graciousness. No one could accuse her of coldness or envy. She toasted Jack's team on their successes, laughed with Kelly about harmless work dramas, and treated everyone with disarming warmth. If Kelly or Jack ever felt threatened by Amanda's presence, neither let it show. They were too busy being lulled by the image she crafted, that of a woman fully in control, who harbored no bitterness. But Amanda's true genius lay in how she gathered knowledge. She befriended HR assistants, IT staff, and executive secretaries, the people who saw and heard everything, yet were so often ignored. She'd linger by the coffee machine after a board meeting, gently prompting a young analyst to share offhand office gossip. She'd offer rides home to junior employees and listen patiently as they vented about company cliques and strange email threads. Her network widened as the months passed. Amanda invited influential spouses out for morning runs in Central Park or Pilates in bright Upper East Side studios. It was in these moments, sweat-drenched and unguarded, that real confessions came. She offered unwavering support to women navigating rumors of layoffs or looking for new opportunities, and always kept their trust. Amanda's emotional discipline was put to the test more than once. There were unanticipated confrontations, whispers about a possible merger that might cost Jack his job, sudden coolness in a friend who must have heard a garbled piece of the truth, or the chilling moment when Kelly tried to confide in Amanda about stress cracks in her own personal life. Amanda listened, nodded, lent comfort with open arms, all the while careful never to reveal what she knew. Forgiveness remained her armor, empathy, her hidden blade. At home, Amanda's private rituals became a refuge. She brought fresh-cut lilies to brighten the penthouse, cooked for herself even when she had no appetite, and took Rue for twilight walks in Central Park. Sometimes, during these quiet moments, she'd quietly grieve all she'd lost, her certainty, her spontaneous laughter, even her trust in the fair precision of life. But just as surely, she reminded herself that everything now was for a cause, a vision of independence and vindication on her own terms. A particularly defining evening came during a black tie gala at the Met. Amanda arrived alone, in an emerald silk gown that shimmered under the foyer's chandelier light. She was approached by the company's newest legal counsel, a woman known to slide information in hushed tones. The conversation began with idle praise and laughter, but Amanda artfully guided it toward innocuous queries about policy, precedent, scandals hushed up in other branches. By midnight, she left with half a dozen new leads, more than a few allies, and subtle confirmation of the power she was quietly amassing. Her efforts were not unnoticed, at least not entirely. Jack grew more attentive at home, eager to keep Amanda happy, oblivious to the true dimensions of her vigilance. Kelly, meanwhile, began to display a practiced generosity to Amanda in public, as if coalition building could undo what was hidden. All this suited Amanda perfectly. Every day was an exercise in restraint, intelligence, and, paradoxically, a reclaiming of self-worth. Through each strategic interaction, Amanda began to realize she wasn't just playing a part to get revenge. Her sense of agency, dulled by heartbreak, was returning with every choice she made, every secret she gathered, every dinner invitation accepted or declined. Where once she had thought power was about appearances and marital bliss, Amanda now saw it differently. Power, she learned, resided in knowledge, in patience, and in the courage to move unobserved beneath the very gaze of those who would underestimate her. By spring, Amanda's place in the city's upper echelons was unquestioned. She was invited to panel discussions, named to charity boards, considered a tastemaker in circles that had once seemed impenetrable. Each step took her closer to the moment when she could act with impact. No one, not Jack, not Kelly, not even Amanda herself in earlier days, could have predicted the formidable force now quietly growing behind her composed smile. As petals unfurled in Central Park outside her windows, and the city pulsed with renewed energy, Amanda understood her time was coming. Every laugh shared, every name remembered, every whispered confidence would be ammunition in the carefully constructed, silent campaign she was waging. And when the right piece of information, the right alliance, fell into her hands, Amanda was ready, not just to reclaim what had been lost, but to ascend to heights wholly her own. The subtle masterstroke of revenge. For months, Amanda had become a fixture in circles of power and trust, her every action measured and her ambition concealed beneath a veneer of cordiality and grace. She had mastered the art of invisibility, being everywhere, hearing everything, but never giving herself away. While others climbed ladders with bluster, Amanda slipped silently through the cracks, cataloging alliances, secrets, and most critically, the threads that would unravel the facades of those who wronged her. Her real test was not gathering the information, but knowing precisely when and how to wield it for maximum effect. With a surgeon's restraint, not an executioner's axe. It began with a piece of seemingly innocuous gossip, shared in confidence over brunch by a junior HR manager who had grown fond of Amanda's encouragement and advice. "Did you know?" she confided, lowering her voice between sips of coffee, "that executive relationships are under review? Apparently, they're tightening compliance and watching everyone at the top. The board wants no scandals, especially not before merger talks next quarter." Amanda's pulse quickened, not with the thrill of rage, but with the cool logic of opportunity. For the first time, timing and leverage aligned. The affair between Jack and Kelly was not merely a marital betrayal. It was a direct violation of corporate policy, one able to tip the scales of both their careers. That the company's stability and perhaps its very future, hung on everyone's reputation, made Amanda's proof both a weapon and a parachute. But revenge, Amanda understood, could not look like revenge. It had to be indistinguishable from professional vigilance. It had to leave her blameless and, if possible, quietly above suspicion. She spent the next weeks confirming every date, every electronic exchange. She cross-referenced office calendars, polite Slack messages, receipts from company cards. Every detail in her dossier matched. She never acted alone, never left traces that pointed back to her motives. Each move was masked by the plausible deniability of ordinary concern. Instead of delivering the evidence directly, Amanda arranged for a packet of anonymized documentation, email threads, calendar overlaps, evidence of after-hours rendezvous, to make its way securely to the company's compliance team. Everything was presented as an anonymous concern. A source within management would like to ensure the board is aware of possible ethics conflicts involving two high-profile project leads. Transparency is vital ahead of the merger. The tone was factual, dry, devoid of drama or accusation. While she could have released the information to the media or started a whisper campaign, Amanda wanted neither spectacle nor spite. Her intent was to restore a sense of balance to her own life, to reclaim agency, not to torch what remained of her reputation for the sake of vengeance. The company's machinery, once in motion, would work independently. Her hands appeared clean. Within days, ripples spread through the upper floors like a silent earthquake. An internal investigation was launched, sweeping up Jack and Kelly in interviews, audits, and a blizzard of subtle, private emails. Amanda observed shifts in mood at work events, Jack's forced smile, Kelly's growing fragility. The couple, once so secure in their secret, began to falter. Neither suspected Amanda had pulled the string. Her mask of warmth and forgiveness held firm. For Amanda, each day brought a strange, equivocal relief. She experienced little pleasure in their downfall. Instead, there was a heavy, steadying satisfaction, the kind that comes from closing a wound, even if the scar remains. She was shocked at how impersonal it felt, how far she stood from the pain her actions caused. Yet, this detachment was essential. Had she surrendered to anger, she might have jeopardized everything. As the investigation deepened, Amanda was careful to remain above suspicion. She consoled Jack, listened to his worries, and, when rumors swirled, advised him to be transparent and comply with HR. She supported Kelly, too, with polite texts and an invitation to lunch, delivered in the same composed manner she'd mastered all season. In the private language of survival, Amanda understood the power of empathy as strategy. The outcomes took time. The board, mindful of its reputation and in need of decisive action before merger negotiations, decided quietly but firmly. Jack and Kelly were put on leave, pending compliance review. The news never made the gossip columns. It was contained to senior staff, shrouded in legalese and non-disclosure agreements. Official lines were drawn, a necessary step for the integrity of the organization. Amanda's connections on the inside kept her informed, but she only responded with concern and sadness to those who reached out. For her, the consequences were bittersweet. The universe had not restored the past or healed the part of her that had loved Jack. But her world, once upended by betrayal, no longer spun beyond her control. She recognized that power did not always roar. Sometimes, the most seismic change was silent, methodical, and almost invisible. As spring settled over Manhattan, Amanda became the person colleagues admired for her discretion and dignity. She wasn't seen as a victim, nor as an avenger. Her invitations multiplied. Her voice was sought on corporate panels, and philanthropic committees recruited her to lend gravitas to their causes. Within the company, a new strategic partnership role, one previously out of reach, was quietly offered to her, granting Amanda not only professional validation, but the means to forge her own legacy. Jack, for his part, moved to a consulting job out of state, his marriage to Amanda dissolving amicably and quietly, without bitter revelations. Kelly resigned, citing family matters, and soon became a cautionary tale within the firm. Only Amanda remained, transformed, if not wholly healed, forceful, but never boastful. Even in private, Amanda found herself changed. She returned to the Metropolitan Museum, recalling the shattered statue and repaired tapestry that had consoled her during the hardest months. She saw in their restoration the dignity of endurance rather than the blaze of retribution. Slowly, she rebuilt a life founded not on illusion, but on honesty, toward herself and with others. Her revenge, subtle and exacting, had never been about destruction. It was about reclaiming narrative, about showing herself, and those who watched from the shadows, that dignity and ambition could coexist. Amanda understood that, while betrayal might break the world you know, what you do next shapes the world you inherit. She moved forward, quietly, a presence now impossible to ignore. Powerful, not because she had unmasked her enemies, but because she had mastered her own story. And though Jack and Kelly had faded from her immediate orbit, Amanda knew the lesson of her subtle masterstroke would endure. In her choices, her reputation, and in the determined poise that even heartbreak could not extinguish. Standing on a new summit spring in New York has a way of sweeping the city clean. The air sharp, the trees lining Central Park budding with fresh green, and the avenue windows reflecting promise. By the time Amanda stepped through the revolving doors of the annual company summit, her old world had vanished behind her, like winter frost dissolving under sunlight. Amanda's new role, Strategic Partnership Director, placed her firmly in the inner sanctum of the company, one long dominated by men, by legacy connections, or by those who could outlast the hurricane of boardroom politics. Her appointment had not come through pity or scandal. It had been won, meticulously, by years of proven intellect, recent displays of unassailable poise, and quietly earned respect from the right quarters. With Jack and Kelly gone, the Whisper network shifted, and, for the first time, Amanda sensed a kind of hush when her name entered the room, a recognition neither of pity nor confusion, but of presence. That recognition was both thrilling and sobering. Power, she learned, was not simply a seat at the table, but the authority to set the agenda. Amanda moved through these new corridors with a quiet confidence. She had learned to measure the weight of her words, to offer opinions not just when asked, but when it mattered. She was invited to strategy meetings at the highest levels, tasked with negotiation on behalf of the company during a critical merger, and featured on panels addressing women in leadership across the city. Outside the neat boundaries of her job, Amanda's life was changing in ways she'd never imagined during her marriage. She adopted new rhythms, finding fulfillment in places that had nothing to do with marital status or public image. Book launches and gallery openings used to feel transactional. Now, they were opportunities for genuine connection. The friends who stood by her became family. Their laughter at Sunday brunch nourished something in Amanda she hadn't realized was starving. She kept expanding her circle, mentoring young women climbing the corporate ranks, and hosting salons where ideas, not just gossip or networking, took center stage. In these moments, the specter of her old self sometimes visited. The Amanda who had measured her worth by her partnership, who had curated perfection for a ravenous audience. She could remember how love for Jack once anchored her, how betrayal had sent her spiraling. Now, sitting in the hush of her living room as dusk fell over Central Park, Amanda appreciated that she had not been healed by time or triumph alone, but that she had rewritten her own story, brick by painstaking brick. There were quiet days, too, when loneliness pressed at the windows and regret tried to edge into her thoughts.
I missed you, Dad.
Amanda had not been immune to bitterness or nostalgia. She missed the companionship of marriage sometimes, the easy sharing of victories and failures, the wordless support on exhausting evenings. But there was power in absence as well. Space to remake herself, space to rediscover purpose. She made regular visits to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as she had during the darkest season of her life. Now, rather than searching for solace, Amanda looked for resonance. In a splintered Greek statue, she saw not her own pain, but the beauty that came from endurance. In tapestries, thick with the repairs of centuries, she no longer saw only loss, but also the value of what remained and what could be restored. Art, once a hobby, an accessory to her social aspirations, became a source of reflection. She even sponsored a program supporting female artists, hosting events that brought hidden talents into the light. On her balcony, one clear evening, Amanda gathered old love letters, journals, and mementos from her marriage. She read them not with rage or longing, but as a gentle witness to the life that shaped her. These were not relics to be burned or hidden. They were reminders that her journey had not been a series of erasures, but a continuous act of becoming. Professionally, Amanda's new status came with challenges she met without apology or hesitation. When the first big merger contract was threatened by an aggressive competitor, Amanda's strategic acumen and her ability to read the personal motivations within a boardroom tilted the deal back in her company's favor. Her speech to anxious staff afterward was clear and direct. We succeed because we are not afraid to face the truth or to start over when necessary. Our greatest strength isn't just the deals we close, but the principles we keep. Such words rippled through the company and beyond. Amanda was invited to keynote at an international conference on women's leadership, where she spoke candidly, not about scandal, not about revenge, but about adaptation, resilience, and agency. It is not falling that defines us, she told her audience in a packed midtown ballroom, but how we rise with clarity and on our own terms. The future I want isn't free of scars. It's rich because of them. Her relationships with her former social circle changed too. Some acquaintances, those drawn by spectacle or status, drifted away. Amanda did not mourn their absence. Instead, she found joy in smaller, deeper friendships. She remained close with her brother, who visited from Chicago, and they laughed about family memories and plans for new travels. With time, she reconnected with her parents, who expressed pride in her not for what she had survived, but for how she had chosen to live. Now, on most mornings, Amanda started her day not with the anxious review of social feeds or news of the city's glitterati, but with a quiet run through Central Park, Rue loping beside her. She relished the ordinariness of these moments, the rhythm of shoes against pavement, the promise of coffee at her favorite cafe, the new steadiness in her step. Jack and Kelly became little more than footnotes in her story, their names surfacing only in the context of work or as reminders of old lessons. There was neither triumph nor malice in this erasure. There was simply forward motion. The power she had sought and won was no longer for show. It radiated from choices made day after day. Supporting young colleagues, insisting on ethical rigor, investing in projects that mattered to her beyond appearance or accolade. Her apartment, once a stage for parties and performances, now felt lived in, filled with plants, art, music, and friends, dropping by not for spectacle, but for genuine connection. On the anniversary of her promotion, Amanda hosted an intimate rooftop dinner for her closest friends and family. She raised a glass over glowing lanterns as city lights shimmered below. Her words, simple and sure: "We are not born invincible, but with every loss, we find new ground, to standing tall, together, and on our own." That night, as laughter and conversation mingled with the spring air, Amanda felt, perhaps for the first time, that she was home, not in a penthouse or a role or an illusion, but in herself. Whatever summits lay ahead, she would greet each morning not as the woman who had been betrayed, but as the one who had climbed, endured, and grown. Her story was still being written, pages open to hope.